Hello, my name is Lakin and welcome to our cozy little zoo. So we just recently got the Americas pack a few days ago, which I'm super excited about, especially because of the ocelots, also the coyotes and the American flamingos. But in this video, we're going to be focusing on the ocelots, even if they have weird climbing animations. I thought I would bring you along as I build a couple different habitats as I continue to work on my own building skills within Planet Zoo to hopefully give you a little bit of inspiration, whether you're a beginner like me or you're a master builder in Planet Zoo. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So as we start the first out of two habitats that we will be building for the ocelots, they're going to have two very different vibes. The first one is going to be kind of super beginner friendly and like super comfortable for me to build with, because we're going to be using the barriers and kind of pre-built things, so it's not going to be as much of like work in my brain and trying to figure out how things work. Even with me saying that this is going to be the easier on my brain, we can tell that these barriers are very much so a struggle for me to get even and straight. It's a lot, you know. We try real hard, but you know, straight lines and we are not on the same page. I think they changed their number and did not give me their new number. I think they've blocked me. You know, it's just we're not friends. But now that we've got the barrier down, I want to get the ocelots in here so I can see kind of what they want and what they like. Because I do, even though we're building this in sandbox mode, I want to follow all the terrain and the plant recommendations. And while I try to get some diversity within the terrain, they don't really want much. They just want a little bit of dirt and a whole lot of short grass. So I tried to give them some rocks and they just weren't having it. But I mainly focused the dirt around the parts that would probably be tracked the most, especially around the door where the keepers are coming in and walking a lot, and then around the front where the animal may pace back and forth. I tried to get the water closer to the fence, but it does this weird thing, which it's fine. You know, we work with what we can, but I know a lot of exhibits, like in real life, have water in the front to kind of help be a natural barrier. And here we are putting in the climbing structures. All these climbing structures are so big. The ones that are pre-built, they're just huge. So I ended up putting this one into the ground, and I do kind of build onto it because we need more climbing structures, and all the other ones were just too big. I'm not about to fit an entire climbing structure and just cover up all of the habitat, especially if it's close to the fence and they can hop over it, which even with me putting that in mind, these ocelots got out twice when I thought I was fine. So, I mean, is it really a habitat that I build if my animals don't escape at least once or twice in the beginning? I don't think so. But I kind of kept the additions that I was adding on to look like they were a part of it, which I essentially... The original climbing structure for this one had 3 levels, but it was just too tall for my liking. So we shrunk it down and we essentially replaced that 3rd one. For a while, it wasn't recognizing that this was climbing structures within the specifications that they like, so I was getting a little worried. But once we got a ramp on it, it was able to work just fine, and there we go. he jumped out. Jumped out super easily. Again, I don't know why I thought 6 feet was fine. I don't know. Don't ask me. And I don't know if this is everyone, but as I watch more and more Planet Zoo creator videos and things like that, I get more and more a little bit embarrassed to use the pre-built things, like the pre-built climbing structures, the barriers that are within the game, and just the basic pieces as like they're meant to be, and not the amazing structures that people come up with whenever they put together like a little bit of string and a piece of wood and they come up with an amazing sculpture. But it doesn't look bad to use the pre-built stuff. So I just need to like keep that in mind specifically for myself, that it is perfectly okay to use the pre-built stuff, the in-game barriers, the pre-built climbing structures and things like that. They're not embarrassing or ugly. They actually look pretty good. Well, maybe not pretty good. They look acceptable, you know? They don't look out of place. Which is a shocker, you know? Something in Planet Zoo looks like it fits in Planet Zoo? Who'd have thought? But now we're into the placing down a lot of foliage. My favorite thing to do is to use like the buffalo grass and things like that, but kind of put it a little bit further into the ground so it's not as high and thick. And so that way it kind of looks more, it blends in easier with the terrain paint that we have, as well as putting lots of little clumps around rocks and under trees and things like that, because not that anyone's going to be coming into these exhibits to mow, but if someone was to mow, or if the grass was to be trampled or anything like that, it would be least likely to be disturbed and have a greater ability to grow higher around objects, if that makes sense. And I also used the bigger bushes, the like hedges, to kind of give some privacy underneath the climbing structures for the ocelots, to kind of like give them a little bit of, not everything has to be eyes on me all the time for them. And I tried to add another climbing tree, but as you can see, it messed up the terrain. So I was like, oh, well, because my idea was put a climbing tree that's a little bit shorter and then connect them with like some rope or branches or things like that. Wasn't gonna happen. And then I was thinking, oh, I'll just put that in the next exhibit idea, like just for like rope and things from tree to tree. I completely forgot about that idea in the next habitat, spoiler alert. So I'm still happy with the ideas that I did come up with. And I wanted a lot of lilies, or like water lilies, lily pads, things like that. But they're just so big. And the North America ones, the ocelots did not like them. They were like, no, 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 no. So we have like 2. I think I maybe add like 2 more into the water. But it's very empty looking in the water. That is one thing that I need to work on, is my water terrain, because I don't know what to add. I add a little bit of the underwater stuff that the ocelots will tolerate, but like around the edges, there's only so many rocks and reeds I can put on the ground around the water before it's like too much. And then here I am trying to add more to the climbing structure. Keyword is trying. And I think I make it work in the end, but it was, as you saw at the very beginning of this video, if you look at them while they climb on it, it's very funky. So it looks fine when they're sitting on it or when they're not on it, but when they're climbing on this climbing structure, it doesn't look that good. But that's okay. We'll just ignore them when they're climbing, you know? Like I do for every other climbing animal in this game. And then when I was finally happy with the actual exhibit itself, it was time to bring over the path. I kind of forgot that I was playing in live mode half the time, so I was quite surprised whenever I saw those people just clustered at the edge of where the path, as far as I'd extended the path out, and they were just trying so hard to get a little look into the Ocelot exhibit from where they were standing. But now we've brought the path so they can actually get a better look, and it's time to decorate the outside of the exhibit. We can go a little bit crazier with the plants. We don't have the restriction because the Ocelots, they're not messing with these plants. Even though I guess technically they could, because it is a fence that you could put your hand through. It's technically an electric fence, but it is, if you want to take that gamble. But I did use a lot of the new Fiesta items, like the bench, the trash can, the lamppost, and then these flowers I thought were really pretty to put on the exhibit board, as well as the statues, or I guess they're statues or sculptures of the flowers around the exhibit board, just to kind of give it the nice fiesta feel, because that's what came with this pack, along with the Ocelots, and wanting to just use the new stuff in a fun way, as well as sprinkling a little bit of plant life down at the bottom, as well as confetti. I really like the confetti. I don't know if I'll use the confetti blowers that came in this new pack, but the confetti on the ground like that around the exhibit board, I love. I thought about changing the colors of the confetti, but I decided to just leave the colors as they were for the most part for this Fiesta stuff, because just to kind of keep it with the whole mentality of just using what the game has given us. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with changing the colors, but I just liked the idea of using it as the game intended. I mean, minus the bench and the trash can. I had to make those green. There's so much green in the exhibit. I thought it tied in a lot nicer than the teal, which is really surprising that I say that, because teal is my favorite color. But I think the green looked way better, and I might even like I prefer the little sculpture on the other side of the exhibit and not the one with the 4 big flowers on it, but I didn't want it to be the exact same on each side, even though I am kind of doing a lot of symmetry with it. And here we go, the Ocelots escape yet again. I need to get better about checking if my animals can or cannot get out of the enclosures. But that is the last escape of this video. I promise. Here's the first habitat. I'll put up a little bit of some beauty shots, I guess is what we could call them, of the different areas. I was a little bit hesitant, a little bit intimidated, and questioned my life choices in making this video at the very beginning of this habitat, but by the end of this habitat, I'm very happy with how it came out, and I really like the education board areas, as well as the the water area, and then the tree with the zebra beside it, and all the lush grass that's underneath that area. I also really like that area as well. I just think it looks really naturey and realistic, and I could see this being a real exhibit in real life. I also like the little banners that I put on them on the fence, even though since I had to raise it up, it's not at the proper height. Like it's not at the very highest point of the fence, but I decided to keep them where they were height-wise, just for sight lines and things like that. But yeah, this exhibit 1, building with the stuff that Planet Zoo has given us and not as building of our own volition, worked out pretty well. And I'm pretty happy with it. But let's go ahead and move on to habitat number 2. So with this habitat, we're going a little bit more intense, and we're going to be making everything essentially from scratch, starting with custom barriers. So I wanted to get a lay of like how big I was going to make this. I was trying to make it the same size as the first habitat, and even with null barriers, I have a difficult time keeping them straight, but I was able to figure it out, and I just outlined it with sand so that way I can see where the lines end and begin without having the blue lines pop up because they're really distracting. And then it was time to actually consider what in the world I was going to be doing. With a blank canvas, it's very intimidating, but I looked up some Ocelot exhibits in real zoos, and ones that I really saw and like enjoyed were they had like stone carvings and looked like kind of like they were within ruins for the habitats, which I thought was really interesting and cool. So I tried to recreate that with what we have, but we don't have like ruin pieces, at least any ruin pieces that match that vibe. We have the Arctic wood and the Arctic like carved stuff, but it doesn't necessarily look like what I was going for, so I still use that dark wood from the Arctic pack. I'm pretty sure that's where it's from, as the base. And then I fix the barrier so that way it's all good to go. It may seem a little bit redundant, but that's just how I can make looking at this blank canvas quite manageable. And because none of the pieces really worked with the ones that are already looking carved, I took these, I believe they're from the Africa pack, these columns that you can kind of custom create, and just turned them into just gray stony columns without any paint on them. Even though I love the bright colors, I was just trying to make it look like, not exactly like the images I was seeing for real life exhibits, but taking inspiration from them. And they're very much so stony ruins. One thing I didn't put on here that it could have probably benefited from was a little bit of moss decals. Just some like weathered look. And one thing that I had a little bit of a difficulty with is this is not straight. This habitat is not straight. And so copying and pasting things, they're on different planes. Like if I was to copy something on one end of the habitat and drag it over on the fence just with the advanced placement dragger tool, it would no longer be touching the fence and things like that. So that was a little bit difficult, but I was able to make it work. And I can't really say what I am and am not doing. I'm just kind of placing things and being like, yeah, that looks fine. That works. That's not horrendous. And just keeping everything very much so gray. And you can obviously tell that some pieces are stone and some pieces are wood, but I think it all comes together, at least a little bit, hopefully. But slowly but surely, we're able to keep adding pieces. And at some points, I'm like, surely I'm going to add too many pieces and it's going to look tacky. And maybe it does to some people, but I thought as I was adding more and more pieces, it was just coming together. Like these little half flowers, putting them on those parts that don't have the stone columns and kind of making it look more like weathered wood to kind of fit into the vibe of the lattice there. I thought was I really like it because it gives a little bit of a different silhouette to the glass portion and makes it to where it's not the same old for every single glass opening. And I knew that the 4-meter construction fence or construction walls were tall enough for the ocelots to not be able to jump out because it's the same height as the fence right beside it. I still wanted something to put on top of the fence to kind of like indicate that like they couldn't jump out even if they wanted to. And so I put this fence there and then I realized, oh, there's glass there. You can see it. And I was like, darn it. I don't want them this high, but I think fine. I'll just have to bring it up and make it taller. But I didn't want it to have as much above. I just wanted a little bit above. But I just did not like that at all. And so, I just did the most logical thing of fixing it, putting it at the height I want, and then just lowering how tall the glass goes up. And it fixed it super easy. The curves were a little bit more difficult to get to line up. They don't line up perfectly, so don't look too closely at the edges. I end up just putting like a pot in front of on the column right there, so that way you can't see it and it looks normal ish. And then, to make it look less odd on the edges, I put other little pots in on top of the other columns. And then I was happy enough with the basis of the custom barrier. So I was like, okay, now we need to kind of work on the inside. And I started with the water. My idea was to like just have the water run and it be like a little waterfall that it goes down. Just like a little like trickle waterfall and stuff like that. I didn't exactly do that, mainly because like there's still a little waterfall, but it's not like I was wanting more of so the gentle like water casually running down the slope, but I didn't exactly know how to do that. But we have to take a little break because we were having ocelot babies. Look at how cute they are. I know some people might not like the design of these guys, but I just think they're so precious. They're so cute. Even when they're doing like typical funny Planet Zoo things. I just think these guys are so cute, and they're gonna be our new residents in habitat number 2, the babies. Perfect timing. So we went ahead and separated them from their parents and got them into this habitat so that way I could see proper what they like, what they don't like, even though I kind of had an understanding of what they did and didn't like because I had literally just worked with the other ocelot habitat. But we can see here that I begin trying to make the beginning of a waterfall, and again, I wanted to do more of a trickle down approach, but I kind of, once I was doing this, I kind of forgot that I wanted that trickle down approach and just kind of kept all the rocks in this area. I still like how it turned out. It just wasn't exactly how I wanted it to. And I've also never really worked with these types of water effects. Usually when I make a waterfall, I just use the big square waterfall and shape that, but that was too big for what I was wanting. So I don't know if it exactly works, but it looks like something. And when you look at it from the front of the exhibit, it looks like what I want it to look like, especially with all the plants surrounding it and things like that. So it does work out. It's just not exactly what I was wanting to go for, and so I just need to better improve my waterscaping skills and things like that. One thing I do a little bit later on is I shrink the water area as a whole, and I bring the waterfall area just down a little bit further so that their habitat isn't covered in so much water, because the main thing, they're not swimming animals. They can swim, and we saw a little bit of them, the little babies swimming whenever I was trying to put in the water effects, but they're mostly climbers, so we want to give them more land than water to be able to play on. And I think it works better, especially since I only did this type of waterfall and not like a little trickle down. I didn't need it to be as long because the water part is not covering up so much, if that makes any sense. And I enjoy building with the water and things like that, but water shaping it and making sure it's the right size, the right depth, things like that. It's very finicky, at least for me. And it's just, you can't look too close around the edges of my water or in my water, because I'm sure there's funky dips and pivots and things like that, and it's just, it's best not to look too closely on that kind of stuff. Now it's time to actually start with building a climbing structure. This was very intimidating. I didn't know what to do, but I ended up finding it wasn't a Ocelot exhibit, it was actually a red panda exhibit that I saw. It doesn't look like this at all, the exhibit doesn't, but it had little climbing structures here and there, and so I just kind of had that picture pulled up the whole time I was building, and just kind of seeing the pieces that I had, and I just kind of messed around with it, fiddled around, and just kind of made something that looks a lot like a cat tree. Which, these are just, wild cats. But I do like how it turns out. It was just, building something from scratch is way more intimidating, especially when you've never done it before and you want to make sure that it looks good. You want to make sure that it doesn't embarrass you and your family when you show it to people. But my biggest thing is making it big enough to where it covers their climbing needs, but also not making it to where it's just overwhelming. And so one thing I thought of was just having like a little like balancing pole essentially on the side that's not connected to the main climbing structure, because I know a lot of zoos they have climbing structures, like big ones, but then they also have just little ones here and there that could just kind of elevate little parts of the ground for them. And then once I found this log, I was like, oh, that is perfect. And so I'm impressed with how I was able to come up with this climbing structure area, because it looks pretty, at least for me, it looks pretty natural and looks like something that I would genuinely see in a zoo, which whenever I've tried to build climbing structures by myself before, they just look really stiff and awkward and very much so like, what is this? This doesn't look like a real thing. But especially as I was placing down grass and foliage around like the fallen log and that part, that quickly became one of my favorite little spots, other than the little waterfall. Even though it's not exactly how I wanted the waterfall to turn out, I still think it's cute, mainly because there's lots of plants and rocks around it, and it's a way to cover up the edges of the water without it looking super weird and blank. But with the foliage, I wanted to add a little bit of color, specifically because like the outside of the exhibit is so gray and dull, which again, it needs to be if I'm trying to emulate just stone carvings and things like that. But I wanted there to be more life and more fun inside the enclosure itself. So I put a few of the purple flowers, but I didn't want to put too many because I was scared that it would be too like eye-catching and like in a way that makes it look like it's more out of place than like it just naturally grew there. But once I was happy with the amount of foliage, I just kind of began to finish placing all the above barriers. Again, even though they can't actually jump out, this is just simulating to them that, you definitely can't jump out. And trying to keep them straight while also trying to make sure they don't accidentally pop out of the construction walls. It's very interesting. Just having to slightly curve them every once in a while so they don't go off the rails. And the edges of the curves, on the one side I'm blocking it with a vase, on the other side I'm blocking it with the tree I had placed from the first habitat, so it's good to go, When something looks a little funky and doesn't look like it, necessarily fits, you just cover it up with foliage. You just cover it up with plants, and people don't look at it that closely. That's the biggest thing that I've learned. Looks funky, get some more rocks and leaves. But because I was happy with the inside of the exhibit, it was time to focus on the outside. At first, I was like, do I just do the exact same thing I just did for the other one? Because I really liked the outside, but the Fiesta things I don't think would have fit with this stony outer layer, so I made it look more modern. So these two exhibits would not fit in the same zoo at all unless they were in two different themed areas, but I did a lot of white flowers and just greenery to kind of simulate this. So it doesn't look as fun and as bright and vibrant as the other one, but maybe this way the focus is on the animals themselves and not on the outer part of the exhibit. It can kind of like blend in and you just focus on the cute little babies. Because who wouldn't want to see these little babies? One thing I do really like that I did is I find the new Ocelot watercolor painting and I stick him in the flowers. Like he's like hiding there. And I thought that was so cute. I was really, really proud of that little bit of creativity there that I did. But these two habitats look so completely different. I can't believe that I was able to come up with two ideas that look this different. There are some similarities with like the shape of the water and the way I just place foliage and things like that, but I'm really happy with how I was able to push myself with this exhibit and build climbing structures completely from scratch, and they not look like I've made them completely from scratch all on my own. They look like, they were made for these animals, and these two ocelots just have a giant cat tree. 'Cause who doesn't want that? I do think I could work better on the water area, like the waterfall specifically, but again, if you don't look too closely at it, it's not that awkward or bizarre. But I do think my favorite aspect of this second habitat is the log balancing area climbing structure part. So those are my two exhibits for the ocelots. Hopefully you got some inspiration. Hopefully, if you're new at building just like me, it looks a little bit less intimidating to be building, whether it's building with the pre-built construction pieces or the building things from scratch. And I thank you so much for coming along with me and hanging out as we work on becoming better builders together. Because like I said before, I was pretty hesitant to make this video. I was doubting myself a lot. Whenever I was first starting it, I was like, what am I doing? I'm not a good zoo builder. I can't make something look presentable for it to be habitat inspiration for people. And I'm not saying these are the most amazing Ocelot exhibits that anyone is ever going to build, but I do think they're good inspiration. Like, I would happily post these for other people to see. But yeah, those are our 2 exhibits for this video. Again, I appreciate you watching. I hope you are having a wild day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! In today's Critter Close-Up, we're going to be focusing in on ocelots. The ocelot is said to be a very picky eater, even more so than other cats. While a lot of other cats will remove feathers and fur while they're eating, ocelots will pluck off all the feathers and the fur before they even start to eat. And if they don't finish all their food, they will cover it up with leaves so that way they can return to finish their meal at some other time.